A friend of mine is about to launch a startup. He has a product, a vision, and a team that believes in what they're building. He has done the research, validated the idea, and is ready to go to market. And like almost every founder I've spoken to at that stage, the first question he came to me with was not about product, pricing, or funding. It was about acquisition. How do we get people? It's one of those common questions in business and also one of the most misframed ones. When most people ask how to get people, what they are actually asking is, how do we convert people? How do we turn strangers into customers as fast as possible? Now, here's what I want you to write down before we go any further. Conversion isn't the first problem. Recognition is. In the markets where there are already a lot of options, which is almost every market worth entering, the brands that win are not always the ones with the best product or the lowest price. They're the ones people feel like they already know before they ever buy. That feeling has a name. It's called cultural resonance. And building it is not a soft, vague, feel-good exercise. It's a strategic system. It's the thing that makes your conversion numbers make sense. And more importantly, the thing that makes your brand worth something long after the campaign ends. This video is going to walk you through that system, step by step. You should be taking notes from here up until the end. So, first, when my team sat down to think through how my friend's startup could differentiate, the conversation started in the obvious place. Who else is in the space? What are they offering? What are the gaps? This is standard thinking, and it's not wrong. But here is a limitation to it that most founders do not see until they are already spending money and not getting traction. In a crowded market, you're not just competing for sales, you're also competing for mental real estate. You're competing for the moment when someone is scrolling or talking to a colleague or thinking about a problem they need to solve, and your name is or is not the one that comes up. Before anyone buys from you, they have to be able to place you. They have to know what you stand for, what you're about, whether you are for people like them. Without that, your acquisition spend becomes expensive guessing. You're paying to put yourself in front of people who have no frame or reference for who you are. Even if they see your ad, your post, your product, there is nothing to anchor it to. So it just slides off. They scroll past. They forget you within minutes. So write this down. Resonance is the anchor. It is what makes people remember you, return to you, and eventually buy from you, often before they have made a conscious decision to do so. And here's what most people miss about resonance. It's not just a conversion tool. It's a brand equity engine. The brands that invest in resonance early are the ones that can charge a premium in year 3. The ones that attract talents without recruiting hard. The ones that get press without pitching. The one whose customers sell for them. Resonance compounds in ways that paid acquisition can never, because paid acquisition stops the moment you stop paying. Resonance built correctly becomes the brand itself. The question is, how do you build it deliberately, especially when you're new, when nobody knows your name, and when the market already has players with more resources and more history than you? At Ideeva Lab, the answer to that question is a framework we call the culture triangle. It's a 3-element system for building cultural resonance before you spend heavily on conversion. And it maps directly to a 3-step acquisition strategy that works whether you're a startup entering a new space or an established brand trying to reclaim relevance. The 3 elements are identity, content, and community, and in that order, always. Now let's look at step 1, identity. Identity signals what you stand for clearly enough that people can recognize you. Identity is the foundation of the entire system. Everything else you build, every piece of content, every community effort, every campaign will only be as strong as the identity underneath it. If your identity is vague, everything built on top of it will also be vague. So here is the test. If someone encountered your brand today, your social media, your website, your last 5 posts, could they immediately place you? Could they tell a friend what you are about in 1 sentence? Not a marketing sentence, a human sentence, the kind someone says over lunch. If the answer is no, your identity is not ready yet, and that matters more than your ad budget. Most brands in crowded markets have weak identity because they try to appeal to everyone. So they use language that sounds professional but says nothing. We help businesses grow, we deliver results, your success is our mission. These phrases carry 0 information. They do not differentiate, they do not resonate, they do not stick. They exist to avoid offending anyone, and in doing so, they fail to attract anyone specific. A strong identity is opinionated. It takes a position. It says something your competitors are not saying clearly enough that the right people hear it and feel it was said for them. It is the brand that does not try to be for everyone because it understands that the brands people love are the ones that feel like they were made specifically for them. Note this carefully. The specificity that will make some people scroll past is the same specificity that makes your real audience stop and say, "This is exactly what I've been looking for." The attempt to avoid alienating anyone is what makes most brands invisible. For my friend's startup, this was the first question we put on the table. Not what is the product? What is the position? What does this brand believe about this market that nobody's saying plainly? What would you put in writing on the record that reflects who you are, even if it means some people opt out? The answer becomes the identity, and the clear identity is the first step in acquisition because it gives people something to recognize, something to remember, and eventually something to choose. What a strong identity does for brand equity over time is that when your identity is consistent and specific, your brand name starts to carry meaning it did not earn through advertising. People begin to associate your name with a position, a worldview, a standard. That association is brand equity. It is what allows you to enter new categories and be trusted immediately. It is what makes partnerships want to align with you. It is what gives you pricing power over competitors who are still competing on features. A brand with strong identity doesn't have to explain itself every time it shows up. People already know what it stands for, and that knowing is worth more than any single campaign. So, step 1 action. This week, write your positioning statement. One sentence that is specific enough to feel like it could only belong to your brand. Test it by asking whether any competitor in your space could say the same thing. If they could, it is not sharp enough. Keep refining until it is unmistakably yours. Then place it at the center of everything: your bio, your website headline, your content briefing, your internal brand document. Make it the North Star every decision gets checked against. Now we move to step 2, content. Reinforce your signal consistently enough that people start to remember you. Once your identity is established, your content layer is what turns a signal into a memory. This is where most brands, even the ones that get identity right, lose the plot. They nail the message once, the launch lands well, people pay attention, and then 3 weeks later, the content has shifted. The tone is different. A new trend pulled the focus somewhere else. The initial signal starts to blur, and all the equity that was starting to build quietly just dissolves. So write this down. Resonance is not built in one post. It is built through repetition that sticks. It works like this. Someone sees you once and forms an impression. 2 weeks later, they see you again, and the impression deepens. A third encounter, and they start to feel like they know you. By the 5th, 7th, or 10th touch point, they're not just aware of you, they trust you. They have a mental mode of who you are that is solid enough to act on. And the moment they have a need you can meet, you're the first name that surfaces. That is what content layer is responsible for creating. Not engagements, not virality, not likes. A mental model. A consistent impression that compounds over time into something people trust and turn to. The discipline this requires is harder than it sounds. The content demands of modern brand building are relentless. Platforms change, trends move. Founders get tired of saying the same things. Teams pivot towards what gets clicks. And slowly, without any single decision to change direction, the brand becomes a collection of unrelated ideas that add up to nothing clear. The brands that avoid this are the ones who understand that consistency is a strategy, not a limitation. Every piece of content does not need to be novel. It needs to be true to the identity and additive to the impression being built. The format can change. The story can change. The angle can change, but the signal underneath it all should be unmistakable and unwavering. There's also a timing truth that most brands refuse to accept. The gap between when you start sending a signal and when your audience actually hears it, really internalize it, is longer than almost everyone expects. Most brands give up just before the signal reaches critical mass. They pivot, rebrand, or chase a new strategy because early results are underwhelming, and then they wonder why nothing ever sticks. The brands that build resonance are the ones that stay the course long enough for compounding to kick in. Every piece of content that reinforces your identity is a deposit into your brand's equity account. So over time, these deposits accumulate into something extraordinary, top of mind awareness that no single campaign could buy. When people in your market are asked who comes to mind for what you do, your name is the one that surfaces, not because of one great campaign, but because you have been saying the same true thing clearly and consistently for long enough that it becomes part of how people think about your category. That is priceless positioning. That is the kind of equity that makes acquisition cheaper, retention easier, and pricing power real. Step 2, action. Pull up your last 90 days of content and identify the single core message running through it. Not the topics, the idea. Is everything pointing in the same direction, or is it scattered? If it is scattered, make one decision today. Pick the message that is most true to your identity and build a 60-day content plan around reinforcing it through every format and platform available to you. One message, many executions every week. A new way of saying the same true thing. Step 3 is community. Make people feel that your brand was built for people exactly like them. Identity tells people what you stand for. Content builds the memory of it. Community is what transforms that memory into belonging, and belonging is the final step in acquisition. Because belonging is what makes people choose you over a competitor they know equally well. So here's a principle worth writing down. People do not just buy products. They move towards things that feel like them. So think about the last time you chose between two roughly equal options, two services at similar prices, two products with similar features. The thing that broke the tie was almost certainly not rational. It was a feeling. Which one felt like it was for me? Which one seemed to understand my word? Which one did I feel like choosing said something true about who I am? That feeling is community, and it is the most underestimated layer of the culture triangle. Community is not about having a Facebook group or running events. Those things can be expressions of it, but community is about the feeling your brand creates in the people it is built for. The sense that this brand gets people like me, that it understands not just what I need, but how I think, what I care about, and what I am working towards, and what frustrates me about the options I had before this one came along. Building that feeling requires knowing your audience at a depth most brands just wouldn't go to. Not demographics, worldview, the things they believe that most brands in your space never acknowledge. The frustrations they carry that nobody in your industry is naming. The aspirations they hold that feel too ambitious to say out loud, but very real in private. The language they use when they talk about their work, their lives, their goals, without the polish that they put on it for public consumption. When your brand starts speaking at that level, reflecting back what your audience actually believes rather than performing a version of empathy, something fundamental shifts. The people you're trying to reach start to feel a pull towards you. They share your content not because it is impressive, but because it is true and it represents them. They recommend you not because they were asked to, but because it feels like a natural extension of who they are and what they value. This is how a new brand earns word of mouth before it has earned volume. This is how you walk into a crowded market and within months have an audience that feels like a tribe. This is how the acquisition problem begins to solve itself because the people you're converting starts doing the acquiring for you. A brand that people belong to is a brand that cannot be easily disrupted by a competitor with a better feature or a lower price. Community creates switching costs that have nothing to do with contracts or lock-in and everything to do with identity. When people feel that your brand represents them, leaving it feels like leaving a part of themselves behind. That is the deepest form of brand equity. It is what turns customers into advocates, advocates into evangelists, and evangelists into a growth engine that compounds faster than any paid channel could sustain. The brands people are genuinely loyal to, the ones they talk about unprompted, the ones they defend in comments and recommend in conversations, they all have this layer working. Step 3, action. This week, Have 5 real conversations with people in your target audience, not surveys, conversations. Ask them what they wish someone in your industry would say more honestly. Ask them what most brands in your space get wrong about people like them. Listen for the exact language they use. That language belongs in your brand voice. Then write 1 paragraph describing the person your brand is genuinely built for, not their demographics, their worldview. What do they believe? What frustrates them? What are they moving towards? Use that paragraph as the filter for every brand decision you make this month. Now, here's what breaks down when you have only 1 or 2 elements of the culture triangle active. Identity without content is a brand that has a strong launch and then disappeared. So you stood for something once, clearly and compellingly, but your consistency could not hold the signal. People formed an impression and then lost it because you kept giving them something different. Content without identity is a brand that shows up constantly but never says anything worth remembering. Volume without direction. You are visible but not meaningful. Everywhere but nowhere in particular. So identity and content without community is a brand that people know about but do not feel connected to. They respect you. They might even follow you, but they do not root for you. They do not talk about you. You have awareness without belonging, which means you're always one better funded competitor away from losing your audience. But when all 3 steps are working together, something different happens entirely. The brand starts to feel inevitable to the people it is built for. Your identity gives them something to recognize. Your content, it gives them reasons to remember you. Your community gives them a reason to choose you and keep choosing you. And all 3 together creates compounding effect that changes what acquisition actually looks like for your business. Your cost per acquisition comes down because the people you're reaching are already warm before they ever hit a conversation touch point. Your retention goes up because the people who belong to your brand do not leave it lightly. Your word of mouth becomes a genuine channel because your community is actively bringing people in. Your pricing power increases because you're no longer competing purely on features or price. You're offering something your competitor cannot copy overnight, a brand that people feel something about. This is what resonance does to brand growth. It makes the entire system more efficient over time. It turns marketing from a cost center into a compounding asset. And it makes the value of your brand something that shows up, not just in revenue, but in what your business is actually worth to investors, to partners, to acquirers, and to the market you're trying to lead. So this is how you can use the 3-step playbook starting this week. Step 1, identity. Write your position statement this week. 1 sentence specific enough that no competitor could claim it. Put it at the center of every brief, every piece of content, every internal conversation about brand. If a decision does not reinforce it, question why you're making that decision. Step 2, content. Audit your last 90 days and identify your core message. Build a 60-day plan where every piece of content, regardless of format or platform, reinforces that one message from a different angle. Let it compound. Do not pivot when early results feel slow. The compounding has not kicked in yet. Step 3, community. Have 5 conversations with your real audience this week. Write the worldview paragraph. Make it your filter. Then look at your last month of content and ask honestly, does this make the right person feel seen? If the answer is not a clear yes, you know what to fix. My friend is going to launch his startup into a market with plenty of competition. The temptation in the early weeks will be to spend on acquisition and see what sticks. That instinct is understandable and not entirely wrong, but it is significantly more powerful when the brand is already doing the resonance work, when the people who see the ad have a frame of reference, when the message lands because it is consistent with everything else they have encountered from you. When they feel, even after just a few touch points, that this brand was built for people like them. Identity, content, and community. These are not soft ideas. They are the infrastructure of market entry and the engine of long-term brand equity. They are what separates brands that spike and plateau from brands that grow steadily, compound relentlessly, and eventually become the name people think of first in a category they set out to own. So before you spend on conversion, Run this system, not instead of conversion, just before it. Build the resonance that makes the conversion feels less like selling and more like the natural next step for someone who already knows you, already trusts you, and already feels like you built for them. That is the work, and it starts this week. So get on the Ideeva Lab website and book a time slot. It is ideevalab.com. Book a time slot because we're always happy to have a conversation, and I will see you in the next one.